This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ann Ortelee's weekly weather. A little late. This is the weekly weather for October 15th to the 22nd. The eclipses are here. The eclipses are here. And the south node and Spica is on the south node. And this week, the sun and Mercury go over the south node. So it's going to be official this week. Off we go. I do apologize for posting late. As I mentioned before, I have some health matters I've been investigating, so it does look like I will be having some surgery to take out some Scorpio parts. I had 69, right? And I had a little bit of bleeding over the summer, so I made a doctor's appointment. So we went investigating because I have a uterine fibroid that's been in there. Saturn cycle, 29 years. It had 2 babies. So there's stuff in there. So it does look like we're having surgery, scope of which to be determined. But I was doing all the testing. So I did testing last week and I did testing, got a cancellation on Saturday, did the cancellation, did the MRI on Saturday. So figuring out the process. So it's been a little bit hectic figuring it out. And if you know my chart, the eclipses are on it. The eclipses are here. The eclipses are here. So I have the new moon eclipse was on my Neptune in the 8th house, which is the Scorpio house. As I mentioned during an earlier podcast, it's Scorpio parts. And then the full moon eclipse, which is in a couple weeks on the 28th, is right on my Venus, Saturn, and Scorpio in the 8th house. So the astrology matches. I don't anticipate it will affect our work together here, but I do apologize for the weekly weather being late today. And if you are of the prayer minded or the Reiki minded, please feel free to send my little Scorpio parts Reiki healing, kind of make them happy because right now they're very cranky. And we're contemplating a divorce. So we'll see. I am having Uranus trine my sun, so we'll see what happens. So I will keep you posted, but that is also why the weekly weather wasn't up. And off we go. All right, so this week we have a lot of changing relationships going on, and we are working on that matter in many levels. And so our job with this energy, let me turn on my pointer here, is to our job with this energy is to work with it as productively as we can, recognizing a lot of times things come to us on eclipses or get revealed. In the case of this thing with me, the energy is very much about how do I process it? How do I work with it? What do I do about it? And we do have a pretty big week this week because Mercury and the Sun are both going to be squaring Pluto. And we are also going to have Mercury and the Sun. Mercury goes into Scorpio on Sunday, and the Sun goes into Scorpio on Monday next week. So we had the eclipse last week. It was very unremarked upon because the world is such a wild, crazy place. But if you were on the path of the eclipse, it ran across this part of the country, South America, and this bottom part of the United States. Here's the United States. The red is the path where it was the strongest, and the black lines are where it was less visible. The thing that I found interesting when I was preparing my new moon eclipse webinar, which is still available on my website to buy, it's, I always recommend using eclipses or using new moons. You have a new moon in your chart every month. We did it on Friday and the eclipse was Saturday, but we're still in orb of it. Scorpio and Sag moons, which are the next few days, are excellent to do new moon rituals. But one of the things it was on was Siwa, so of course the new moon and the sun moon was on Siwa. And that was an ancient oracle in the olden days. There were oracles in Greek and there was one in Egypt. So is Egypt in the news? Yes. And so this actually was in the western part of Egypt, near Morocco, near the Bedouin. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. But at any rate, they would go to the oracle and get guidance, kind of like the Oracle of Delphi. This was the Oracle of Siwa. So we do see Egypt involved with this eclipse, with the Palestinians being the door opening to Egypt and them coming into Egypt from the Gaza Strip. So I thought it was kind of cool, So I know we did eclipses last week, but it is still not too late to do your new moon eclipse. And that is the path of totality. Okay, so this week we are working with Sun, Mercury, finger of God, right? Talking to Neptune and Uranus. So it's going to form over a few days. So this is when it starts with the Sun on Sunday, but you can see Mercury's creeping into it too. And the Sun is right now quincunx Uranus, and it will quincunx Neptune, and Mercury will come to quincunx both of them. So what this means is it's kind of a cosmic pointer. Now, if we threw the nodes in there, you know, because the nodes of fate are also in there, they're kind of supercharging it and fueling it. But it also says, remember, Venus is in Virgo ruling that Sun and Mercury. Trust that you show up and you do the work step by step. Don't skip any steps. Just go, okay, let me do the work. Let me focus on it. Let me get it set up and moving correctly, and then it will be okay. So that's the energy of this eclipse, and that's the energy of this finger of God. Trust the process and just show up and do, okay, what do I have to do next? Okay, what do I have to do next? Which is kind of what I've been doing with this surgery business. Had the sonogram, they said we want an MRI. I called 2 weeks, called the MRI, got an MRI cancellation, went in on Saturday, which is usually when I prep this. So then I work on the weekends. So that's, you know, it's just kind of like just step by step. And then when you get back, you fall off the path, get back on step by step, because Mercury and the Sun are both answering to Venus in Virgo, who says, do the work, do the steps. Don't cut corners, just do the process. We also have Juno entering Virgo on Tuesday. Now, she spends about 4 months in the sign. So she's been in Leo for the last 4 months, which she was playing with Venus, right? Now she's shifting into Virgo. And the reason she takes that long is she takes 22 the asteroid belt is between 4 years and 6 years around the sun. So they're a little longer than Mars. They spend longer in a sign than Mars does. But Juno at the top in Taurus, or I'm sorry, in Virgo, is okay, how are we partnering? Who are we partnering with? Why are we partnering with them? And so the energy is very, very strong around partnership. We also see the, you know, we still have that little pile of stuff going on with the South Node, because remember, when the Sun is within 15 degrees of the nodes of fate, we call it eclipses. And we also have the Sun in what we call the path of fire. So via combusta runs from 15 Libra to 15 Scorpio. So that's kind of why, if you were watching the internet and everybody's like, oh my God, this is going to be a big one. This is going to be a big one. That's why. Plus, we also have Pluto squaring the nodes. And later this week, this last week, when Mars, 2 weeks ago, when Mars squared Pluto, we went in the Israeli, Palestinian Hamas, Israeli Hamas started up. I'm going to be correcting because I don't think it's all the Palestinian people. The Israeli Hamas attacks happened, but it also, now we're going to have the Sun Mercury going there onto that South Node. And the South Node, of course, does take out things, takes out people, takes out leaders, takes out and changes. It also eclipse, it helps things leave, you know. So we had Speaker McCarthy leave. We've had changes. You think about the people that have been leaving in your life. It's a big departure time. South nodes are wasting and removing, so they remove things, or they say to you, this needs to be removed. This needs to be your relationship to this needs to change. Maybe that's an easier way to think of it. So as Juno goes into Virgo on Tuesday, she says, okay, so like, what are we actually doing? What are we doing? How are we doing it? And here I am back at work Tuesday morning recording this for you. So, you know, the Virgo took a couple days. We're back at work. Do the work. That's the energy of the heavens. Do the work. Remember, the Virgo Venus is running all of those Libra planets, and she's running the Taurus planets. So she's in charge of Pallas Athena, your strategy. She's in charge of Mercury, your communication ability. She's in charge of the Sun, how you see things. These planets are on the world point, Mercury and the Sun, so you're really seeing things clearly in a way you hadn't before. And with Venus on the world point, she's seeing things in a way she hadn't before either. The other thing that's happening is the Venus is running the Jupiter and the Uranus. Now, they were answering to Leo, Venus, for 4 months. And now Venus in Virgo is saying to them, I need you guys to go back to work and do stuff. So if you feel that, oh, I got to go back, I got to go do it, it's so much forward motion, go, 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 that's the energy. It's very intense. But we do notice there's a lovely mystic rectangle in this chart. So the intensity of the energy is important for us to pay attention to, because the mystic rectangle says, if you listen for that inner wisdom, that guidance, you'll be okay. And it's a little bit of a funky mystic rectangle. Normally, they are earth and water or air and fire. This particular one is earth and water, air and fire both. So it's got all 4 elements in it, which is a big deal. So we see this energy of 4 choices. The 4 elements of creation are stepping forward. And they're saying, when you let go of whatever you let go of, there is a whole new chapter that's going to begin, that's going to start, that's going to take off, that's going to encourage you to go forward. We also have that nice little grand trine in water from Mars and Vesta and Saturn in Pisces, which encourages us to step forward. And now Juno is the head of a kite. She's the apex of a kite, and she says, fly this way. Venus says, fly this way. There was a while ago, there's a song that Bacon Brothers wrote, go this way, you go in my way. And so the energy is, you go in my way, you want to go my way, let's go my way. So the energy invites us to go our way, but go our way with the Virgo intent. So look in your Virgo house, go do the stuff in that house. Early Virgo, 0 to 7, that's your place of action. Next up, we do have the sun dropping into the south node. That happens on Wednesday. And so that's intense, and it also kind of pushes us away, and it shifts our energy. We still have that mystic rectangle in the sky. We still have the kite in the sky. What direction are we going to head in? And it also is very strong in terms of, as the sun hits that south node, even though the eclipse happened, which warned us, you're going to be releasing things, the sun in the south node is when it really hits. And so honoring the end of the relationship that you've been in. Now, sometimes you're ending it, sometimes they're ending it. But the whole point of the south node planets going into the south node, and we know the sun does it once a year. I mean, we have eclipses once, the sun goes into the south node. We have 2 eclipses. One is a south node eclipse. But whenever a planet in your chart goes into your south node, you let go of something, whatever is symbolized by the planet. So in this case, the sun diving into the south node encourages to look at where you have been Libra partnering, where maybe you've been doing more of the work or they've been doing more of the work, and to think about how you want to redefine. Doesn't mean you have to end the relationship, but you do have to end the relationship to it in that form. And it requires adjustment. Virgos are all about adjustment. You don't have to kill it and blow it up. You just have to change it a little. And then you get where you're supposed to go. So that's the energy of this sun going into the south node. You don't have to, the person can continue, you can continue, but the structure of it shifts and changes into something else. And if we know that, then it helps us get to that new place. Mercury goes into the south node on Thursday. Again, we're releasing, it's in the 3rd house of communication. Leo is rising in this chart cast for DC. There is still the mystic rectangle of fated choices. And mystic rectangle, when I read a client and they have a mystic rectangle, we'll spend some time talking about it, because it's the sense of there's a calling. There's a calling to do something. There's a calling to take a stand, to make a choice, to be whatever you're supposed to be. Bill Clinton had a mystic rectangle. He's a little kid in Arkansas. He's 7 years old or whatever, and he tells his mother he's going to be president of the United States. And of course, looking at the background, single mom, abusive alcoholic stepfather, beating her up. And this kid's got a vision. And of course, he did become president. Mystic rectangles provide us with a vision. So in the midst of the loss, in the midst of the endings, your job is to say, well, I know this stuff is ending, and I do feel like I'm really losing something important. At the same time, I'm going to be going forward in a new way to create new relationships, because we know when something ends, we graduate from college, we leave those people behind, but we make new friends when we get our job, right? So we know whatever the leaving is important for us to be like, okay, this is going, what's my new path, what's my new directive, what's my new calling? So as Mercury goes into the south node, it tends to be announced. Sun Mercury Cazimi, Now, when planets get to be in the heart of the sun, that's going to happen on Friday. And of course, it's like when the sun is right exactly joined to Mercury. Whenever that conjunction happens, it revitalizes the Mercury, it revitalizes the sun, and it's kind of in the heart of the sun is what we call it. Now, as it approaches, it's getting burned up a little, but then when it gets into the heart, and the analogy I use for Cazimi is candles. When I was a kid growing up, we always had candles at dinner. My sister to this day has candles. She lights candles every night. But we had those big ones, the big old wax candles. And so the candle would be lit in the table. And you're a kid, you play with the candle. Drove my mother crazy playing with the wax. But you put your finger in the flame and it doesn't hurt. That blue part, that's Cazimi, the heart of the flame. Put your finger above the flame, that burns a little. But you'd sit there kind of poking your finger, and it was always fascinating to me, like the actual part that you would think would be hot. The blue part was actually not that hot, but above it was hot. So when Mercury meets the sun, Cazimi, after the sun goes through that node of fate, there's a conscious awareness of, oh my goodness, look at this. Look at this. And of course, it's forming that finger of God that I opened with. Mercury and Sun are both in a finger of God to Uranus and Neptune, saying it is changing, Uranus, maybe not in ways you like, maybe not in ways you can control, but Neptune, it's for some bigger spiritual purpose. And one of the things that I like about astrology, or what I try and do with it, and you're not always successful, but what I like to do with it is say, hey, this is what the heavens are telling us. This is what it's presenting us with as an option of how to proceed. And we can do it or not. We can decide to go yes, we can decide to go no. This is where the free will comes in. So as Mercury hits that south node and the sun hits the south node, and then they meet up after they went through it, they're going to be, wow, we just ran through the flames and we're here. Let's get together. Let's come up with a new vision. Now that we've gone through the changes, what is the vision that we're heading towards? And if you think of it that way, it'll help you deal with all the changes that are going on now, especially if you're experiencing some losses, because the losses are going to say to you, okay, that's leaving. And what's leaving when it leaves? That's leaving. Oh, wow, that's kind of important. Yep, that's important. But what's coming? Because something's coming because something left, right? And so think of it that way and just know that you're being guided. This is a finger of God. It's a finger of fate. It invites us. It's a yod. It says, go this way. You can do it. But you do have to adjust. That's the only bad part about fingers of God. Not always easy. As you might go, I kind of liked it like that. I mean, I have a lot of Scorpio in my chart. I'm always like, I liked it the way it was. I'm like, I know you did, but that's not the way it is anymore. Well, I don't really like this. Like, okay, but it is what it is. You got to deal with it, right? And so that's the finger. And so as we get to the end of the week, as we face these fated choices that we're all making fated choices this week. So again, it's really important to think about and watch the fated choices that other people around you make, because this is their opportunity to say, hey, I want to leave this situation. It's not working for me. Now, if they're afraid, because Saturn makes us sometimes a little afraid, they're afraid to leave this situation. Saturn, he's retrograde right now. He's going to come back. He's going to come back and say, so why'd you make that decision? So choose to go bravely forward, even if, because the North Node is ruled by Mars and Scorpio. He is saying, be brave, go forward, it'll be okay, even if every other part of you is jumping up and down and going, no, I don't want to do it. Just kind of hang in there and step by step. It's not a speedy eclipse. It's a very precise, measured, because Virgo's in charge of it. She's ruling all those Libra planets, and she's ruling the chaos planet Uranus. And she's saying to Uranus, well, you're like little Mr. Chaos. And he's like, yeah, I am. And remember, in chaos, bad things can happen. So you have to kind of go, okay, let's calm the chaos. Let's make a plan. Feel the fear. This is also a very anxious energy, very anxious week, because the Libra planets, we think of them as sweetness and light, but they're answering to a worrywart Virgo, Venus. And she's like, I am a little worried about this. And you have to listen to her and take good care of her, because she's up there stirring the pot and she wants to know the answers. So give Virgo Venus the answers. I'm a Virgo. When I was a kid, hopefully you have no young listeners in the audience. When I was a kid, I was inquiring of my mother of how does Santa Claus get to all those houses in one night, right? How does that happen? And we would be driving in a car, and that would be when I'd say it. My mother go, we'll talk about it when we get home. I'm like, all right. I just want to, I don't understand the logistics of it. And of course, we get home, my mother takes me up to my room and rips me a new one. Like, just because you know about Santa Claus doesn't mean you should ruin it for your brother and sister. And I'm like, what do you mean I know about Santa Claus? And then she tells me, about Santa Claus. I'm being careful here if there's young ears. And I burst into tears. I started sobbing hysterically. And then she realized what she'd done. And I went, and then she's like, all right, well, now that you know about Santa Claus, you have to help with Barney and Mary, my brother and sister, with it. I'm like, oh, right. But it was asking those friggin' nosy questions. So Venus in Virgo is full of friggin' nosy questions right now this week. And just answer her questions, even if she gets upset, even if she didn't really like the answer, because she's asking the questions. And that's the Sun Mercury Cazimi. Ask the questions. And you know how some in the law, sometimes when you see it in courtroom, they go asked and answered, asked and answered. Make sure you answer the question. We also have Mercury squaring Pluto on Friday. So he is moving into a square with Pluto. And of course, Pluto's squaring the nodes. So Mercury first squares Pluto because he's going a little faster than the sun. This is a closing integrative square. Mercury squares Pluto once a year, and he is psychologically integrating what needs to go on in direction. Still have that mystic rectangle in the heavens, still whispering in your ear, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. Still have that grand trine in water. The Mercury square Pluto says you must make a choice psychologically to be able to proceed. And I would encourage you to make a brave choice, not a fear-based choice. Right after that, the Sun squares Pluto. That happens on Saturday. Now we know when Mars squared Pluto, that was the Israeli Hamas thing erupted, was also the fight of the speaker in the House. So we are looking at Sunday for that being really kind of in place, because Sun square Pluto says, okay, we have figured this out. We figured out what we're doing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, because that is, in the astrology, that's when it settles in. And we kind of get to understand the choices that we're making this week. So be very conscious this week. Think long-term as well as short-term. Finally, when we get to the weekend, we are going to have, we're going to have it unfolding over a few days. Remember when the Mars and the Mercury and the Sun all went through the hammer of Thor? Well, Venus, the goddess of love, is going through that hammer too. And so she is in place. She is swinging the hammer. And we've had that hammer a few times earlier this year. The Sun went through, Mercury went through, Mars went through. Boom, boom, boom. This is the third pass with Venus going through the hammer. Remember the North Node, or the axe of Thor. It was, I got somebody wrote me an email in August and said, the axe of Thor. I feel like I've been axed. And I was like, wow. Okay, this is the follow-up with Venus axing stuff. So she's like in the mood to chop things down. Now remember, she's in charge of all these other planets. This makes it a juicy eclipse. This is why everybody was going crazy. Oh my God, the eclipses are coming. They're going to be so bad. And well, they've been pretty dramatic. The world's a friggin' dumpster fire floating down a river, right? So for all of us who are riding in the dumpster, or all of us who are observing the dumpster from the shore, this is when we watch Venus swing that hammer, and there's a lot of clarity. Like what's going to happen. Then we have on Sunday, we have Venus, after she swung that hammer, she goes and trines Jupiter. And she says, this is what I was doing it for. This is what that hammer was for, all, all that stuff leading up to now. So, but again, she rules Jupiter, so he's not gonna necessarily argue with her because she's like, this is why I did it. And, sometimes with Venus and Virgo, what they do is not what you might do. We don't often think of Virgos as having vengeful energies, but there is the word virago, which is based on Virgo. And when Virgo is miffed, she can tend to be a little bit dark. Remember, it's in its fall when she's in Virgo. And we go, why? And she goes, well, because she's critical, she's waspish, she's kind of like whatever, so, the energy of a wasp energy, a little stingy. And if you know about wasp, they can sting you and they don't die. A honeybee stings you, it leaves your stinger in you and they croak too. Wasps can sting over and over and over again. So Venus is now swinging that hammer of Thor and claiming something. The goal here, hopefully, should you decide to accept it, is it's swinging something that I like to have happen. But it may be swinging something you don't like to have happen. And that's okay too. Remember, we work with the planets as they come to us, and we say, okay, that's how that's going to be. Got it. Now, what is it I have to do next? As she trines that Jupiter. And then finally, on Sunday, Mercury enters Scorpio. And now Mercury is changing his rulership, which means Venus in Virgo, who reports into Mercury in Scorpio, now has a new boss. She reports to Mars. Before, when Mercury was in Libra, Venus was in Virgo, and Mercury in Libra said to Venus, what do you want to do? And she told him, and they were in mutual reception. Now Mercury changes signs, and he goes into Scorpio, where he now is reporting into the Mars in Scorpio. Now, Mars in Scorpio is in its ruler, but Mars in Scorpio is pretty intense. There is no fire in the sky. It's all earth. It's about physical reality of how we're going to do it. We still have that mystic rectangle up there, but now we're going to take action as Mercury enters Scorpio. And Mars is ready to go. He has got his plan. He's got his mission. He's in his favorite sign, and he's on it. We also have Mercury, then after he enters into Scorpio, he enters into a trine to Saturn. And remember, Saturn's been very quiet. He's been hanging out. He's down at 0 Pisces. He went into Pisces in March. He kind of went forward. He stopped going forward in July. He's going to go forward in a couple weeks. But as Mars trines Saturn, he is really very much about the accountability, Mercury trines Saturn. He's very much about the accountability. And so, kind of like if you count out money, when I work an OPA event and we sell stuff, and at the end, as the treasurer, Angelina would count the money, and she, has much training in counting money, having worked in a bartender, working as a waitress, working in, service stores and stuff over the course of her life, as do I, because I worked as a waitress. And so you count the money and then you give it to someone else. Don't tell them how much and say count it. And then if you both match, good job. So Mercury trines Saturn, you're counting the money. You're counting and you're making the plan. And in 2 weeks, when Saturn goes forward, we get to see the results of it. So it's an interesting, because you get the cash and then you got to make the deposit in the bank. So Mercury trining Saturn on Sunday says, okay, that's what we're doing. That's what we're working with. As I mentioned, we had a new moon webinar last Friday. We did have, we were just having a lot of technology issues for people getting in, but you can buy the slides, the PDF, the slides, the PDF, and the audio. Fit and good couple days to do your eclipse ritual. The Scorpio moon, the Sag moon, they get things done, and this is a pretty potent eclipse. On to our astrology and event analysis after we finish, because I realized last week I completely skipped over this section. I got so excited, I jumped into it and left out the moons last week. So this week, the sun is going from 21 to 28 of Libra. As mentioned, it hits the nodes, it has conjunction with Mercury, and it squares Pluto. So the sun is busy in intense activity. Mercury this week goes from 22 Libra to 2 Scorpio. Again, it's mirroring the sun. It's following, it's forming that finger of God. It also dives into the south node. It has a square to Pluto. It enters into Scorpio and has a trine to Saturn. So Mercury is moving quickly again. He's out of his retrograde shadow. He's going, close to 2 degrees a day. So he's really flying through the heavens. Venus this week is a little waspish because she's in Virgo and she's forming that hammer of Thor. So she has the hammer, that's her big feature. And of course, the Libra planets and the Taurus planets report to her. And as that hammer of Thor swings, we watch, or the axe of Thor, as I renamed it because of the Aries component, and Aries rules axes. As that axe swings, we're going to be kind of going, ooh, that's a little wild. And Venus is going from 6 to 13 this week, Virgo. Mars, quiet. He does have a parallel to Saturn, which is taking stock of what he believes, so that's important. We also have Jupiter this week, 12 of Taurus, and it's in an opposition to Ceres and Scorpio, wanting to delve in and understand things. Saturn's very quiet. He is part of that mystic rectangle, and he has an opposition from Juno, which is again, finalizing partnerships and changing them. The rest of the planets are pretty quiet, and then we have Juno entering into Virgo, where she'll be for about 4 months. And that is happening on the 17th. So Virgo, when Juno goes into Virgo, she suddenly is more focused on the details of the relationship, whereas when it was in Leo, she was more the big picture. So this is a good time, if you've been working on projects, to kind of focus on the details of them. As we go forward here, we had our new moon on Saturday, new moon eclipse. So today, or on Sunday, the moon was in Scorpio, and it was in Scorpio yesterday, and it went void. It goes void today, the 17th, at 11:44 a.m. with a sextile to Pluto. It's void for about 4 hours, entering into Sagittarius at 3:36 p.m. It'll be in Sag Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It goes void on the 19th at 3:02 p.m. with a sextile to the sun, because the sun is still in Libra, right? So moon and sun sextile, again, good times to do your rituals. If you didn't do a ritual on the new moon, you got a couple more days. Moon goes into Capricorn at 9:55 p.m. Thursday night. It'll be in Capricorn Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, and it has the quarter. The second quarter of the new moon happens on Saturday, and then it is void on Sunday at 2 a.m. in the morning, East Coast time, and it's void with a square to Mercury. So that's disappointing or changing news. And then the moon is void until 2:06, just 6 minutes, a little quick, fast void, when it enters Aquarius. And the Aquarius moon has a nice closing aspect of a square to Mercury. We don't mind squares from the, to Mercury, because usually it's just information you have to work with. So the week's energies are pretty good. The difficult days, today is a difficult day, Tuesday, and Thursday is a crossroads day, making decisions about crossroads. And they're just busy. Friday's busy, Saturday's busy, Sunday's pretty stressful, next Sunday, the 22nd. And that is the energy of the moons. Okay, on to the politics. Got a lot going on. As I said last week, back to 1982, which of course was the Iran-Contra war, and Iran is back in the news. So here is Israel We looked at her chart last week and we watched her have the attack. And now as Scorpio Mars comes into this first house, she's taking action as a country. And we also have the Uranus over here on the sun. Now Uranus is retrograde, so it's not on the sun exactly, but it is, you know, Israel has a Mars Sun square. So if you know anybody with a Mars Sun square in their life, they tend to take action. It's an action-oriented chart. And because the sun is in Taurus, it answers to the Venus in Cancer. Venus in Cancer answers to the moon in Leo. Moon in Leo says, gee, how am I feeling about my security? Answers to the sun. Sun's in Taurus says, yeah, I got to be secure. So there's a very strong security need in the Israel chart, which you get. Golda Meir famously said, if other people put down their weapons, war stops. If Israel puts down its weapons, they get destroyed. So there's an energy here of, you know, how are we going to proceed and what are we going to do? We also have the nodes of fate in 1st and 7, right? So they're very much about how we do it and the natal chart, natal nodes, but now the natal nodes are in 12 and 6. So the transiting nodes, right? So we're going to watch those nodes, and we do have all those energies in the 12th house hitting that south node. So this is a very important week in the Israeli chart. We also have Iran in the news, okay? And this is a map of Iran. And here is Iran's chart for those of you on the podcast. April 1st, 1979, 3 p.m. in Tehran. And that was when the Ayatollah Khomeini took over Iran. Now, Iran has been a hotbed lately. They had all those riots last year, which I didn't talk about, but the women, you know, the woman that got killed for showing her hair, and then the riots in the street, which led to a few hundred other people being killed and imprisoned. And so Iran has a pretty tough, as you might guess, a pretty tough chart. We see that sun in Aries up here in the 9th house, which is the house of religion. We see the sun answers to the Mars in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces, which is we take action kind of behind the scenes in the 8th house manner. We see they have Mars on the south node. Of course, it was overthrown in a religious, it was going, you know, the Shah of Iran got kicked out and it got taken over by a religious organization, Ayatollah Khomeini. The moon in Gemini is an interesting moon because it has two sides. We see over here, Iran has Jupiter at the last degree of Cancer, which is currently receiving the opposition from Pluto, right? So they're making noise seriously about, you know, what's going on. And of course, we have cruised a couple of our aircraft carriers into the Gulf, into the Mediterranean. So this is big, you know. When I'm looking at these aspects, I'm like, oh, it's Pluto, Jupiter, and Cancer. And of course, you know, we joke about it, you know, on, you know, when you kind of get into talking to your conspiracy friends, right? I have conspiracy friends. And they're kind of like, yeah, you know, like into chaos, there's an opportunity. So Iran, which is having a lot of problems internally with the women rebelling and riots and all that stuff against the religious order, you know, good to have a nice war that you can focus your people on, and, you know, death to America and all that. Now, we do see Mars up here, progressed Mars is in Aries, squaring the Jupiter, squaring the Pluto. That is a really nasty T-square. So I believe, you know, not part of the government in my lifetime, in this lifetime, but I believe there's a lot of people worried about what's going to happen with Iran. And you can see that Mars there and the Venus there. The Venus is right behind it. Venus is getting the square. And of course, that's the rebellion of the women against being killed for showing their hair. But it also is the rebellion against the religious control, but it's also the 9th house. So this is foreign excursions, i.e. helping Hamas with its arms. So it's an interesting chart. So we really want to watch Iran. And for those of you who are into praying, you know, I've been meeting with a group I meet with fairly regularly. And I've also been in a couple other groups, and I've been going, can we do a prayer intention, you know, for world peace, or for not so much, you know, I mean, I don't know that we'll ever get peaceful because we're kind of a nasty species, but, you know, praying for a peaceful solution. I mean, the whole point of politics is to prevent war, you know, rather than settling it with knives and guns. we're supposed to talk it out. Now, of course, we've lost a lot of that in our culture lately, have you noticed? In the world lately, have you noticed? But the goal here is, the idea of the UN, the idea of forming this, forming these alliances is for people to go, mine's bigger than yours, sit down. And, I don't want to hit you, but I can. It's a very contentious energy. As you have noticed in the world, it's a contentious world right now. So the idea is contention, contention, contention. How do we work with it? What do we do? How do we speak to it in a way that it hears us, or look at it and go, we need to set a limit, we need to set a boundary, we need to set a frame. Now, the hard part is Saturn is in a sign of no boundaries. He's in Pisces. He doesn't necessarily want to have boundaries. But we also see Iran was formed. It's having its Saturn opposition right now, right? It had it in July, which is, they were having riots last fall also. So there's a lot of energy with Iran, like, okay, how do I calm my people? Well, I mean, I'm, killing them and locking them up, but how do I work with them in a way that is productive? And this whole foreign adventuring thing that they're in the mood for right now is not necessarily a good thing. But it's an interesting chart because now Iran is stepping in. We're going to help Hamas. It's like, oh no. We know we don't want to go there, people. We really don't. Like, how do we? Okay, so I can't do anything. I can say prayers. I can send money to Doctors Without Borders. I can do that. But what you want to do is think about in your own life, how do we get people to sit down, have a conversation, and work on establishing a peaceful environment. But if someone says, my goal is to kill you, then you have to be, the whole idea here is paying attention to what people say. And we unfortunately don't do that. We listen to what they say and we don't believe they're going to do it, or we think, oh, they're not. But if they tell you what they're going to do, believe it. That's what this eclipse is about. They've told you. You've been told. If you've been told someone has a belief system and they have this vision and you agree with it, or you don't say to them, you have to stop, that's what the eclipse is also encouraging us to do, is say, I'm sorry, you have to stop now. There are consequences for actions and behaviors. And that's part of what this eclipse is about, is understanding, drawing a line in our relationships, in our dialogues, in our conversations with people in our lives, so that the line that we have in our own life is respected. If we fail to draw that line, you know how Saturn works, he makes it worse. He makes it worse. He goes, you didn't learn your lesson. And you go, Saturn, so this is really a good time when you're nervous to do your Saturn, whatever it is, right? Just do him. So I have Saturn in Scorpio in the 8th house. I'm doing my Saturn, looking at those Scorpio parts and figuring out what the hell's going on with them. I'm leaning into it, even though part of me wants to pull the covers over my head and run the other way. But I know if I don't deal with it, it's going to get worse. That's what Saturn says. It's going to get, what do you need to learn to get this right? And so that's the energy here. Next up, Jim Jordan. I had Shelley write me and ask about Hakeem. I think we have to get through Jim first, Shelley, and we'll do him next week if Hakeem gets there. But Mr. Jordan here, of course, is a wrestler. And he won 149 of 150 wrestling matches. The guy does not lose often. How do wrestlers work, right? What do? They pin you to the ground and they make you say uncle. So it was not at all surprising when this hit the internet. Hello, Stephanie from the Hannity Show with Fox News. Sources tell Hannity that Rep XXX is not supporting Rep Jim Jordan for Speaker. Can you please let me know if this is accurate? And if true, Hannity would like to know why during a war breaking out between Israel and Hamas, with the war in Ukraine and the wide open borders with a budget that's unfinished, why would Rep XXX be against Jim Jordan for Speaker? Please let us know when Rep XXX plans on opening the People's House so work can be done. Lastly, are there any conditions Rep XXX will choose to work with Democrats on the process of electing a new speaker. The deadline for comment is, thank you. Now, when you got the right-wing media threatening, I take this as a threat, sorry, and they publicized all the people that weren't going to vote for Jordan and said, call them and yell at them, right? And so all these congressmen are getting called. You don't know who you're getting the call from, but you're getting called because the right-wing media has said, call these people and complain that rep so-and-so isn't voting. So a couple of them have folded. To me, that's bullying. And I have Pluto in the 7th, and I have a Mercury-Mars square. And so when I was a kid, my brother was quote unquote weird. Well, he was actually gay, but I didn't know that word, didn't know what it was. But he got beaten up a lot as a kid. And I would go punch out people. I got banned from the Parsons swimming pool because David Parsons tried to drown my brother and I beat him up. And unfortunately, I'm good to have on your side when you're facing a bully. In another way, I really go after bullies. I have a major problem with bullies. You know, peace and love, but you come picking on my brother, and David Parsons tried to drown him, and I beat him up, and I got banned from the pool. I mean, he had scratches all over his chest, man. I beat the crap out of him. And the energy, when I see a bully, I get really mad. And so this to me is bullying, which of course, this is my politics section, so I can say that. And I have a Mercury-Mars square. So you pick on my friend, you're picking on me too, right? So that energy is, and I may say to the friend, you're like wrong, but I'll help you. You know, like, I mean, I remember working when I was younger, I was working for a guy named Charlie Flood, who was this tough guy from the Red Hook district in Brooklyn. And Charlie was tough. Charlie was very tough, tough Irish. But he, you know, when you did something wrong, he'd say, fix it. And then he'd go fight for you, right? But you fixed it. I mean, you didn't fool around. So I respect that. You know, like, this needs to be fixed. Okay, I'll fix it, you know, and let's go work with it. So the energy that this is, to me, this is just friggin' bullying. So we'll see if those Republican senators, not Republican senators, Republican congressmen hold out. We'll see what they do. And you can clearly see they're a little nervous that they're going to work with the Democrats. And of course, they're blaming the Democrats for kicking McCarthy out. And, you know, they didn't vote for him the first time. They didn't vote for him the second time either. So it's just very word gamey. But at any rate, Jim is up. You know, Steve Scalise, they were like, we're not letting you in. We're not letting you in. So he just said, okay, I'm out. I mean, he didn't even try and do a vote. But Jordan, 149 out of 150 wrestling matches. This guy does not go down easy. He also has the eclipse opposite his sun. So in his 16 or 18 years in Congress, he's never passed any legislation. His job has been to be a disruptor. As John Boehner called him a terrorist. So anyway, we'll see what happens. The election is today. And here is what's going on in Jordan's chart. So once you know, and he's a Gemini rising, so he was mentioned and then it went away, and it was mentioned and came back. Now this is his solar chart, but that's why he always has to do things a couple times. And we do have his progressed midheaven coming, the solar arc midheaven coming to Jupiter. And we also have him having Sun square Pluto, progressed Sun in Aries, squaring Pluto. So he is at maximum bully mode right now. And he also has Mars here, progressed Mars on his progressed midheaven in his solar chart. So he is fighting for this job. Now, if he gets it, there is a possibility that he runs into some real problems in a couple of months. But I'm not really liking the whole idea of him being the Speaker of the House, because he was part of the January 6th. He was in all the meetings at the White House. And he didn't comply with a congressional subpoena. He didn't talk about it. He wasn't going to do it. And now he's there trying to obstruct the investigation, the judicial party's investigations, and writing nasty letters to the state prosecutors who are bringing charges against the former president. So the guy's not a good guy. So, but we're having a Pluto transit, people. It's Pluto in our country. We have to learn how to deal with abuse of power and say, why are you using your power? Are you using your forces for good, or are you using them for evil? And if they're using them for evil, then maybe we need to look at that. And if they're using their forces for good, and again, everybody goes, everything's corrupt, everything's corrupt. I'm like, well, Yeah, but then step in and do something about it, right? So that's the energy here. Yeah, and because they're not broadcasting these reps numbers, none of us are calling and saying, vote him out, vote him out. They're only hearing the vote him in. So we'll see what happens with the Republicans. But Hannity sending a letter out, you know, I mean, whatever. It's our Pluto transit. And we know with Pluto transits, they're hell to go through. When we get to the other side, we learn great lessons. And so that's it for the week. And I hope you had a great weekly weather. And you can sign up for Patreon to get this every day sent to your phone. And forward we go. Hopefully you have a good week. Remember, the eclipses are here. The eclipses are here. And if we get to Sunday and Jordan isn't elected, there may be some change. For Shelley asking, which is I know what she was really asking with. But if we have to get past that Mercury Cazimi, and we have to get past the squares, the sun square to Pluto, because that's what's big in Jim's chart. He's got that, his progressed sun is square to Pluto right now. So we'll see. Stay tuned. Promising to be a wild week. The eclipses are here. The eclipses are here. Take care and have fun. Bye.